I realized that a lot of successful people didn't like school, but they liked learning. And getting to learn from people like Dan Pink, Simon Sinek, that they're pointing out that these absolute leaders and people that are going to push society forward aren't the compliant rule followers. I love those kids too, but we have for years told that really creative, kind of crazy, on the edge, artistic kid that you're not good. You need to shut your mouth. There is a moral and literally a patriotic need to get those kids to realize that they are unbelievable and they need to be at the forefront. So I'm excited to work with students like that. I'm excited because, like, and again, I think I'm saving myself, but I was that student too, and I them. That's my why.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Productive Creators podcast, where we talk about all things productivity. We talk about interesting new tools, innovations such as AI tools, strategies for creators and entrepreneurs to become more productive. And we also talk about very specific topics related to the guests that we are having on. For example, creating content, running a business, and also let's talk about today about the topic that's near to your heart, Don, education. We have Don Wettrick on our podcast today. Don is an entrepreneur, podcast host of Started Up, also co-founder of Started Up Foundation, author of Pure Genius, Building a Culture of Innovation, international speaker and presenter. Your mission is to empower students and teachers to create innovation and entrepreneurship programs in their communities. There are like three things that I really would like to talk about today with you. First of all, about your background and all the amazing things that you've done. Then productivity as a creator, as you create content yourself. And also about the future of using, for example, tools like AI, how to embrace AI, how to, instead of doing it as the tool of evil that incentivize cheating in school, a tool that steals our jobs, for example. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became interested in innovation in the world of entrepreneurship? And
Sure. Yeah, I taught for 20 some years, but along the way, I kept noticing, and I kept following a lot of thought leaders that were talking about shifts in the workforce and how we were going to change, and most notably, I saw a TED talk by a guy named Daniel Pink, and he talked about what motivates people, and really, he went on to talk later about what was known now as Google time or 20% time. And I remember at the time thinking, what if there was a class? What if there was a time like that in the school day where we would allow our students to work on the things that they felt like they wanted to work on? And one thing led to another. And I ended up starting a class called Innovation and Open Source Learning, which opened up a lot of exciting things to do for our students. And it kind of took hold, and we ended up getting a fair amount of media from it. I ended up starting a podcast because in a lot of ways, some of these people were calling into our class. And we were lucky to have these people call in our class, and they were intrigued by, you know, um, I didn't know such a class existed. So we started connecting with people. We started to build great things, and and most importantly, the students were doing cool things. If they don't do cool things, there's nothing to talk about, and I'm not on this podcast. But they did do some awesome things. We grew, we scaled, and now the state I live in is in Indiana. We're known for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but we end up starting a youth pitch competition for entrepreneurship, and that has grown and scaled. And now we're doing all sorts of crazy things. So yeah, podcast host. I'm an author. Most importantly, I'm a dad of 3, husband of 1. But we're empowering a lot of our students to think for themselves.
all right. So what's the story behind Started Up? Because it's something that actually started because one of your students or students wanted to have those calls that from entrepreneurs as a podcast. Like this was the idea, right?
Yeah, like really, a lot of it was there was a group, and most importantly, our governor of our state was taking a look at what was going on in the classroom. So
Hmm.
they had this idea of doing a youth Shark Tank, and what would it look like if you helped? Because they knew that they wanted to get my students involved, and they're like, "Hey, we think that your students will do well at this, but what if we can grow and expand this kind of programming?" And so, really, it was mostly as a mandate, but it was a request from our governor that maybe we should have a statewide program. But again, I like kudos to my students that were already doing things. It was off of them noticing that things were going on. And so yeah, we grew and scaled it with the state's help. We're not ran by the state, but we're helped out by them. And we just kept growing and growing. The first year, there was like 100 students that went through it. Second year was like 250. Third year is 425. Fourth year, it was 1,600. Then 2,400 this year. It was just over 3,000. So more and more students are going through the program. We're getting really high quality pitches. In a lot of cases, they're not ideas anymore. The students are actually starting businesses, sometimes
Hmm.
events, sometimes services, sometimes apps, sometimes products. But what we're really proud of is our theme is always see a problem as an opportunity. We don't want kids just pitching an idea for, I want to start a food truck. Why? I want to start a
Yeah.
new t-shirt line. Why? Now, if you're solving a problem, that is to say that you have some market validation and people want to see your product in the world, that's a different story. But anyway, I'm shocked on how much it's grown and scaled and how much the students are doing really cool work.
So, what are some projects that sprung off basically your classes and everything that you've done?
Yeah, like I'll go over the last two winners. 2 years ago, these two young men were their problem was fishing lures were coming in the wrong colors for their part of the state. So they made their own
Okay.
plastic injection molding for crawdads, shad, and worms. And at first they were selling to just people in Indiana, but then after a while they were starting to get customized orders. And then now they have sales in all 50 states. They're doing a lot. Last year's winners, these two young ladies, very young, they were both freshmen in high school. So they were like 15, 16. Their problem they wanted to solve is there was so much fast fashion. You wear a shirt a couple times and you throw it away. So they didn't like all the landfill waste. So they decided to do an upcycling event. And what can you reuse with old t-shirts? So they took a bunch of old jeans, shredded the t-shirts, and then took the jean pattern and made it into a little dog bone. And they sold dog toys. That's nice, but they could only make about 15 or 20 a week.
Yeah.
So
Right.
once they started getting into our process, they met with a small business development center, and they gave them the advice that there was in their town, there was a organization that hired adults with special needs, and a lot of these adults would sew and assemble things together. So all of a sudden, these young ladies, which by the way, they were selling dog toys to then also help fund their local humane society. So these three girls were getting clothes out of landfills. They were getting money to the pet shelter, and they were hiring more adults that have a lot of unemployment rate. They were solving problems. So again, I can't emphasize enough how proud I am of the fact that they're not just, I want to start a food truck. They're looking at a problem. Now, that's not to say that there'd be some students that said, I want to start a food truck because this zip code is a food desert or there's not enough good nutrition. But we're always asking them, see a problem as an opportunity, solve something, not just make a pitch for an idea.
Wow, that's amazing. What are some things that you found challenging, like introducing things like the 20% time on projects that you're passionate about? What are some things that like students struggled with in the beginning?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is that there are so many students that have anxiety of, is this going to be on the test? Like they didn't know how to
Yeah.
grade themselves. When I gave them this time, they were some of the good students with good grades were really nervous on how they obtained a perfect grade. So that was the first thing. The second thing was getting students comfortable with like it's not going to be successful at first. Learning how to fail, being very comfortable with it. Like, hey, you got product feedback and no one liked your product. Some students took that hard, but like that culture of they gave you time to tell you your product or your event or your service sucked. That's really
Yeah.
nice of them. Because if you were going to spend more money and put your product out there and everybody eventually won't buy it, It's because you didn't like, you want feedback. So I'd say those two lessons were the hardest. But then once you get it, then like you're not just okay with criticism, you're like you're begging for it. Tell me what's wrong with this. Oh no, you're really nice and you're trying so hard. I'm really proud of you. They're like, no, no, don't tell me you're proud. Tell me what you hate about this. And once you can transfer them over, then they're unstoppable once they can get that mindset.
Yeah, because we've seen like examples of people coming on like Shark Tank and being really married to one idea and then spending a lot of time, sometimes years, inventing things or like inventing solutions to problems that nobody has really a problem with. So I think that's really great that you to show students basically how to fail basically. Yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about a little bit about you being a creator and the Started Up podcast, because that's something that's really near to my heart. Like content creation is the thing that I'm really interested in. That's my passion.
Yeah,
Right.
it really started off by asking our students, who do they want to learn from? Who do they want to talk to? And so they were reaching out to people. And so one day we had Tim Ferriss for a
It's
couple of hours.
amazing.
Actually, I think I see his book in the background.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
like the students wanted to talk to him, and then he got back with us. And a couple of them came up to me like during our interview with him, and they go, "Are we recording this? This is really cool. I want my friends to hear that I was interviewing Tim." And I was like, that's a good point. I am recording this." And they're like, "You should put it out as a podcast." And in some cases, all the students wanted was a really cool excuse to talk to people they looked up to. And so I was like, yeah. And then I knew that we were onto something because a lot of people were saying yes, shockingly, like people that we really wanted to talk to. So that got me in and got me the bug. But the more I kept talking to these people, the more I was like, this is actually good advice. Now, don't get me wrong. There's been some guests I've had on the podcast that you're like,
Yeah.
but we've really learned a lot from people that have learned the hard way. And I think is one of the reasons why people like reading books. A guy can say, hey, here's what I've learned over the last 10 years, and you can take 3 days and learn it. Podcasts are the same way. You interview people and you're like, here's where I've gone in my journey, and here's all the different things that I've done. I think it's such a great opportunity to learn that way.
Yeah, exactly. That's also one of the reasons why I started this podcast, purely out of my curiosity and have an amazing guest on my podcast. What are like some memorable things that your guest said that really inspired your further work, like maybe working on your book or publishing it even?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful stories is it's when people ask me what my favorite episode is, it's always easy to answer. And it was with Jeff Hoffman. Jeff was one of the co-founders of Priceline.com, but he's done a lot of things. He started a lot of things. And he was telling me the story on air that he had just made a lot of money. He was pretty young, and his words, not mine, suddenly he didn't have as many friends. That there were some people that are like, oh, you've changed. Or some people were jealous. And in some cases, he was like, I isolated myself. And he was watching the news one night, and there was a story about this women's shelter they told the women they had to leave because the shelter had ran out of money. And Jeff watched that, and he's like, oh, that's a shame. And he's thinking about the TV station, and he says, they should do something about that. It's one thing to do a story. They should do something about that. And then he says, I still have this saying on my wall. He said, there is no they is he. He should do something. He says, here I was feeling sorry for myself that I just made a lot of money. All of a sudden I was lonely. And I realized I had enough money to pay off the debt of this women's shelter. And he paid it. And he says, and it's still to this day, like he's paid it. So I like the fact that he saw a problem on TV. He said somebody should do something, and he realized that somebody was him. That story will always stick with me. I think Jeff is he's a legendary person. And I mean, I've had some great stories on air. That one's my favorite.
Amazing, amazing. Like, it's the one thing is like starting a business from an egocentrical standpoint to earn money for yourself. And then there's also the other part where it's okay. I've made a bunch of money, and now it's time to give back, basically.
Right.
So, Don, what's your why? Like, why do you care so much about innovation in the field of teaching? I know my
Yeah.
why I care about education. It's because I've been through the educational system myself,
Right.
uh, and it wasn't very pleasant for me because like if people would have told me the things that I know now,
Right.
I wouldn't have gone through depression and stuff like this. But what's your why?
Yeah, I think that's one. I think of me as a student. So my dad was a teacher, so you're expected to do good, and I did mostly okay. But I had that entrepreneurial mindset, and even before I started this class, I realized that a lot of successful people didn't like school, but they liked learning. They didn't like compliance, they liked exploration. And so I think that in getting to learn from people like Dan Pink, Simon Sinek, that they're pointing out that these absolute leaders and people that are going to push society forward aren't the compliant rule followers. I love those kids too, but we have for years told that really creative, kind of crazy, on the edge, artistic kid that you're not good. You need to shut your mouth. There is a moral and literally a patriotic need to get those kids to realize that they are unbelievable and they need to be at the forefront. I'm excited to work with students like that. I'm excited because, and again, I think maybe I'm saving myself, but I was that student too. And I them, that's my why. That, not that there's anything, again, I want to be there and help the students that are the straight A students too, but I kind of want to nudge them and say, hey, listen, the you just sitting down and memorizing things and being like that, like
Yeah, right.
that's that. Yeah. So
So, how do you strike a balance between fostering creativity and independence in children? Or like with students, like what provide at the same time providing structure and guidance? Yeah,
uh,
that's like a
yeah,
challenging.
no, I mean, like, in everything there's a middle way. The things that are inside the Venn diagram, completely unstructured and having no expectations, is chaos. Having too much structure has no creativity. Somewhere in the middle is innovation, entrepreneurship. Somewhere in the middle. But like, I just actually made this post not too long ago. I think that we have gone so far as a world of being so empathetic that there's not an expectation to improve. I know that when I was a kid, there was no empathy, but there was a drive to be the best. I'm 50 years old. So you made fun of the people that didn't. And by the way, I love a more empathetic society, but we've gotten so nice that we're not like, you know what though? You still need to achieve. And so that really drives me, of that in that Venn diagram of expectation, but being nice. You having some freedom to explore what you want, but you still have an expectation and some key metrics. Like when I ran my innovation class, you told me what you wanted to look into and learn and achieve these next 2 weeks, but you had to give me some goals. In 2 weeks, I should have accomplished this. Because if you said, "Oh, I just want to chill. I just want to chill," like, that's not education. But if you said, I want to try an experiment. I want to learn how to do this, or I want to do this event and get feedback. Well, that is a lot of freedom of choice, but there's still some measurement there. There's still some parameters of, I still expect you to do something. That,
Yeah.
to me, is that balance of you having the freedom and be creative and be innovative, but me having expectations that I want you to do something.
Now, let's shift a little bit in the area of future of education in the context of AI tools. Like, how do you think AI tools will impact teachers, students, and then creators or entrepreneurial,
Um,
creative people? Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that we're going to listen to this in 3 more years and then laugh of we didn't know what we were talking about. I think it's going to make us question. Oh, you know what? So I'll give this answer. I'm diverting a little bit. Years ago, good calculators came out and they said kids aren't going to learn math. The calculator does it all for them. And while that's true, advanced math, you need to use a calculator for. Calculators didn't
Right.
calculators didn't kill math. I think a lot of AI, the things that people are talking about, things that people are worried about is this is going to make you write an essay for you. What was the point of writing the essay? If the point of writing the essay was just to regurgitate that you've read something, we're going to start asking ourselves, well, why did we do that? And there's going to be other ways of checking for understanding. I also think that there's going to be a premium on authenticity because in the short term, I think a lot of AI written things are still going to need some editing, but still, even a well written AI query, actually, you have to write good queries. You have to
Yeah.
still get creative with feeding the AI really specific things for it to not be too generic. A lot of times when people say, sometimes learning is asking the best questions. And I think that we're going to feed AI a lot of queries and we're going to
Yeah.
be possibly surprised by going, wait a second, that is really well thought out. Maybe we should understand what the AI means. Now, the thing that scares me is who controls the AI and what information are you feeding it? Is it going to have a very right wing bias? Is it going to have a very left wing bias? We're so politically divided, and there's not a lot of trust in the tech community in this country that a lot of tech companies are very pro left. So there's already a lot of distrust on the right. And at the same time, as we record this podcast,
Yeah.
in the United States, they had some Senate hearings again today of shutting down TikTok because we don't trust the people behind it. So AI is it for it to be there's just a lot to figure out. Because some people think that AI is somehow it comes up with it on its own. I'm like, no, it's programmed. And the people that program it can have biases. Now, smart people can learn how to trick that system and get it to do other things. But the governance of AI is slippery, it's messy, but I'm here for it. I would rather live in a world that will figure it out than just to start banning things because you can't get the genie back in the bottle from here on out. So, do I think it's going to disrupt school? Yes. Do I think it's going to disrupt it in positive ways? Mostly. Social media in schools, I liked it for some things, but it's also caused a lot of eating disorders and anxiety and suicide. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So, like anything, nothing is bad or good. It's like weather. There is no such thing as bad weather. It is weather. It's rainy out. That's bad. Rain makes things grow. AI is not bad or good. It just is. We're going to see how society adjusts.
I mean, how do you think will AI change in regards to jobs? Like, will it eat jobs, or will it more likely produce jobs?
I think the speed of it is what's at issue because we've always innovated our way out of certain jobs. No one delivers coal anymore. No one delivers milk. There are just some jobs that go away. It's the speed. People that are bloggers, is this going to make your life easier? Yes. Will some of it replace you? Maybe. There's just a lot of but like we're always innovating. So if you think that AI is going to replace what you do, you better have a good specialty.
What do you think are some applications of AI, like, for example, for anything in the creative field, like how can we leverage AI in a way that's not destructive? It's more supporting the work or the creative work.
Uh, I mean, it checks code. It can write basic code. It's going to be interesting to see. People are going to come up with some crazy ideas, and at minimum, there's going to be some AI tools that will help it write a basic framework. I think that there are going to be songs written. I think that there's going to be poetry. I think there's going to be scripts for interesting. But at the same time, AI is going to be so predictable, and like after a while, people are like, well, although it's funny, like I personally think that cinema has taken a step back. Like one more Marvel comic book film, I cannot stand. Movies are so damn predictable. I think they're written by AI right now. There is such lack of creativity, but I think that maybe with AI, we're gonna like really favor things that are like really creative, and then we're gonna have to guess: did an AI bot write
Like
that, or was it somebody that was really
I
creative?
think I
So
personally think that AI will generate movies, like very personalized movies. I don't know. That's one of my ideas is that I'm gonna type in I want to watch a movie. I don't know, Michael Jackson and then David Hasselhoff or something like this, and then AI will basically create those things. Like what are like some dangers in regards to like using someone else's intellectual property or like actually their own voice? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't. Who knows? I think again, this is going to be funny when we listen to this in 2 years and think this was a lot of fear, but it wasn't quite there. I don't want to get too dark, and obviously, I do a lot of shows that involve with students, but I will say my biggest fear is not just even an AI, but just in general, it's pornography. There's going to be deep fake pornography that people are going to have fantasies of being very harmful, being really sick, because people are like, oh, that person's not really real. But in this film, I want you to do terrible things to her. And we're going to desensitize people that I personally think that like the most toxic thing right now in our culture is the access. Our children with young brains are not meant to see this much pornography. There's not, and it's doing damage to students. It's hurting relationships. So I don't want to go too down a dark path, but that is my biggest fear with AI is the deep fake pornography stuff is going to be awful, and it is a slippery slope on how we treat people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. If you would start your podcast again from scratch, what advice would you give to aspiring creators? What are some pitfalls when it comes to creating content? Yeah,
Yeah, pick the smallest audience you can. Pick the smallest audience you can that will resonate with what you want to do. Like, I think it is easier and better to start a podcast with, like, if you wanted to do a podcast and it's just about what is going on in your town, it is easier to grow
yeah,
and scale something. You can always go bigger. But when you have a great big idea and you want everybody to listen to it, it's very hard. So if I had to start it all over again, I would start off with something really micro or niche. Like I see a lot of podcasts pop up about reacting to a TV show, and they like just really dissect into last night's episode. Great, because you can build a fan base around that. You can build an identity. And then also have realistic, you can always level up on guests. Start with good people. And then my other thing is a lot of times, especially, and by the way,
hmm
I'm be launching my podcast because I've been so busy running the organization that we've had several requests of, can you go back to interviewing people like Gary Vaynerchuk and things
yeah,
of that nature? So we're going to do that. But when I was at the height of my podcast, if I felt like the podcast went well, a lot of times when the show was over, they'd stick around and like, hey, thanks, great podcast. And I'd say, who else should I talk to that is a great story? I wasn't fishing for celebrities. I was fishing for who else has a great story. And a lot of times the people that would like some of my best episodes
wow,
were off of
it's
recommendations.
amazing.
Because they're like, oh, well, and some of these people weren't even that famous, but like, holy, like their story was amazing. And ironically enough, some of my best performing podcasts were not famous people. They were
Wow,
people
that's
doing interesting
interesting.
things.
Now you mentioned that you're relaunching the podcast. Obviously, you have a lot of things on your plate, and there's actually one of the things that I wanted to ask you, like how do you
Oh,
balance the demands of,
yeah.
of creating content and your responsibility?
I haven't. That's the terrible thing. So that's why the podcast has been I really haven't had on guests. It's been Jamal and I talk a lot. I
Yeah,
love Jamal. He's one of my best friends, but we've been doing a lot of banter back and forth, but finding and booking talent for the show. I didn't have time, but now we're at a point in the organization. Our revenue has been really good and we've hired some more people. And so now I will have the time to do this more and really give it the quality because I got to be honest, even at the height of my show when I was getting a lot of downloads, there was no production. I pressed record, I didn't make any edits. I released it. I didn't cut up clips. I didn't put it on TikTok. I didn't put it on Instagram. I just put it out there as a podcast and it still performed well. So I'm thinking, what if I did this now with a team and I had clips and I did things the right way? So the answer is I did not do a good job of balancing it. I did an okay job when I was a teacher. When I started running this organization, there just wasn't enough time. Now we've done
No.
well that I've got
Will
some
you
more time.
relaunch it? That's interesting. Will you relaunch it as a video podcast or like?
No, I'm probably going to be doing video clips. Yeah, that's for sure. And yeah, I've always done just audio. There's only been a couple times where I've captured video. Although one time, actually, my interview with Gary Vaynerchuk was also live streamed. And then we did a one with a guy named Jocko Wilnick that was also live, and Tim Ferriss. Well, actually, we never really released the Tim one. We just released that to friends. That was like 2 hours though. So anyway, so yeah, like I'll be doing video as well.
That's great.
Awesome.
All right, then let's wrap this up. Thanks for being on the podcast. I'm really excited.
Oh, Pat, I salute you, and I'm honored to hear that I'm among your first because that journey, getting those first couple of guests are everything. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't know, maybe I should start a podcast. Pat just started a podcast.
Yeah.
And he reached out to me. And by the way, flattery will get you somewhere because, hey, the last couple of episodes you've been talking about AI. And I'm like, thank you for listening to that. So there's a lot of people that will say yes. And just starting, whether it's a blog, a video, a short chat form, whatever, getting into that habit of creating content is just, at minimum, it's a lot of fun. And you get to meet interesting people. And so tonight I got to meet Pat and I enjoyed it. So like Pat was saying, I heavily encourage you to start your own journey of content creation.
All right. Thank you. Now, if people want to find you, where can they find you? Like, where's the best place for?
Probably I'm trying to get more involved in Twitter again. It got so political. I just left it for a while, but I still have a pretty healthy following on Twitter at Don Wettrick. My favorite place is probably LinkedIn. So you can find me, Don Wettrick, Werick. Yeah, I'm there a lot.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.